I am Daniel Lucas and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's the author of the book What Should I Do with My Money? Economic Insights to Build Wealth Amid Chaos. No other than Mr. Bryan Kuderna.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dan. I'm happy to be here.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Bryan. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. So I think you kind of gave a good intro there. In short, professionally, I'm a financial advisor. I've had my firm since 2008, started doing this right out of college. So I'm a finance guy. Also, I have my show, the Kuderna podcast, all about wealth and its original meaning, a state of well being. And I'm an author. So I've three books. The latest one I'm sure we'll talk about today is What Should I Do with My Money?
Interesting, Mr. Bryan. At what age did you realize that you're good in writing?
So that's a great question. I would say it was probably sophomore year of high school. I noticed like when we started getting, writing assignments in English, I was like the one kid in the class that was not like, totally upset and angry and how are we ever going to get this done? I said, all right, this is cool. And then I noticed that lots of times my papers were longer than my friends' papers. And they'd be like, dude, why are you trying so hard? Like, what are you doing so much? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I really wasn't trying hard. Like, this all just kind of comes out of me, and I like it. This flow of words and everything. And I noticed I was good when I started writing for our school paper. I had a sports column, and my coaches and my teachers were reading it like during lunch break or study hall. And they kept coming over like, Brian, this is really good. Like, I can't wait until you do another column. I really enjoyed reading this. And that kind of gave me that spark for like, you know what? Not only do I like this, but I might be pretty good at it. And, then I just kind of pursued it for the rest of the way.
Who are your favorite authors that influence you the most?
Oh man, and that's another tough one. There's so many. I think ones that come to mind like quickly would be like Dan Brown. For the longest time, I only read nonfiction, and then I started to get more into fiction. Probably only the past maybe like 5 to 10 years, and his was kind of like a good segue because of the way that he took, real things in history and real artifacts and kind of what was going on in the world going way back, over time, and then building a great story out of it. So I love all his novels. I think are awesome. And so I'd say Dan Brown is up there. I love a lot of the classics, in finance, like Napoleon Hill's, the Carnegies, a lot of biographies. David McCullough is another great one. I've read a lot of his on like American history. So there's so many. I'm reading The Divine Comedy right now by Dante, which is totally different, more poetic, but just such a great read. So there's a lot.
If you sum up all the criteria of all your favorite authors, what is it or what are they?
I would say that when I read a book, I'm looking for a great story that's written in a way that can keep me engaged, that I feel attached to whoever those characters might be, and one that like as I'm reading it, I can almost close my eyes and say, "Hey, this could be a really good movie." Like I can see it, and I like that. I like books that then are turned into a screenplay. I think is pretty cool. So I think that style of writing that's entertaining, but then merge it with a lesson. And so that lesson can be history, it can be, real life history, or it could be some sort of lesson that is maybe more theoretical or philosophical, but something that you can walk away with and say, hey, I remembered that book because I remembered that story and it had an impact on me. It's something I can carry with me through my day-to-day life. So I think those are my favorite, because a lot of books you can read them and then a year later you're like, I don't remember what it was about. I remember I read it. But I think the memorable ones have a great story and some great lesson embedded somewhere in there.
What is your short term and long term goals in writing?
So in the short term, so I'll say the very short term is I'm always trying to come up with new content, and that becomes kind of ammunition for articles that I, publish with a lot of different magazines and publications, particularly on finance and economics. And then that's also great PR for my book, obviously. And then I use that lots of times for discussion topics through my podcast. So I think in the near term, it's just content generation that's, really current events and things like that. Long term, I would like to maybe have another edition of What Should I Do with My Money 3, 4 years from today, because life is always changing. I think it's a timeless book, but we just have more and more, things we can connect that to in the real world in the present day. And then I really like doing fiction. Like I wrote this book, Anorak, during the virus pandemic. And Anorak is actually just Corona spelt backwards. And that was fun. That was a young adult fantasy novel. And I think that has all the makings of being, an epic, maybe a trilogy or, a longer term storyline. So there's got to be a sequel to Anorak.
Wow, interesting, Mr. Bryan. But before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening according to my ranking tops in the last 30 days on the Apple chart. Because in Zambia, I got number 7 on the Apple chart. Thank you, Zambia. Pakistan at number 20, Spain at 21, Qatar at number 29. Nigeria at number 56, Chile at number 68, Slovenia at number 76, Zimbabwe at 139, Egypt at 153, Singapore at 154, and a lot more. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world like Mr. Bryan Kuderna. So, Mr. Bryan, what should I do with my money? Economic insight to the build wealth and amid chaos. How did you crafted it?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, what should I do with my money? Began as a bit of a sequel to my very first book, which is titled Millennial Millionaire. So, Millennial Millionaire came out in 2016. It was almost part memoir as a young financial advisor, and also just kind of a crash course on finance for millennials. So, that was my first book. Everyone was always wanting a sequel since it came out. So I began writing this kind of next iteration in 2020, I believe, and I took, I moved a little bit more from personal finance into economics and understanding, that wealth, while it involves money, I always say money is just one spoke of the wheel. So it allowed me to get much more broad in, what are the hot button issues that are affecting the world today and view it from an economic standpoint. So kind of get scientific with it. And so that was in 2020. I started to write this manuscript. And I said, you know what? My first 2 books I self published. I felt like I really built a base and I had just really good content here that I was feeling confident with. So I floated it out to a lot of literary agents, a lot of publishers, got a lot of great feedback. And a lot of the publishers wanted to work directly with me. I had a number of offers, and long story short, the best offer came from McGraw-Hill, huge international publishing house, obviously, with a lot of resources. They paired me up with an amazing editor, this lady, Michelle, who walked me through every step for like about 2 years as we edited and almost did I wouldn't say a rewrite of the book, but I mean, line by line, cleaned it up and drove home some key messages. So it was a lengthy process, but it was a lot of fun as a writer. It was very collaborative with McGraw Hill, and then that just came out in February of this year.
Interesting, Mr. Bryan. What should I do with my money? What behind the title of this book?
Yeah, so and that's another interesting one because when we started, I just called it Millennial Millionaire 2. I kept it very simple. Then when I was dealing with McGraw Hill, they were like, well, we don't have the rights to the first title. Technically, we can't make a sequel. Maybe there's a way around it, but they were kind of floating out the idea like perhaps we should kind of start anew here. So I said, all right, that's fine. I think this is going to be really big and kind of stand on its own 2 feet. So let's do that. And we kept going through all these different, title ideas. Mind you, the entire manuscript is written and we're still debating ideas, which is funny because I think a lot of people think you start with the title, but I found a lot of authors actually end with the title. And so as we were going through all this, with McGraw-Hill, they were like, we want to have something that's searchable, that will do great for SEO, that's memorable, that people can just mention and refer. And so, such a Googleable, if that's a word, term, is just what should I do with my money? It's just such a common question we all have. And that was already a part of the book. In my intro, I talk about the genesis for all these conversations and all this research is simply that question, what should I do with my money? I get asked it 100 times a day by clients. But then what that does is it opens up kind of Pandora's box. No matter what my recommendation is, they're going to wonder why. Why is that the right recommendation? And then as we dive down that rabbit hole, that's where we start to explore all the inner workings of economics and the interplay between our money and the world. And that's where the title kind of killed all the birds with one stone. I think it summarized the emphasis of the book. It was a great title for marketing. And so it just fit and we took it and ran with it.
Very well said, Mr. Bryan. So, if you compare millennials, baby boomers, or other previous generations in terms of dealing with money, how you compare them?
Yeah, so it's unique because it's kind of like as things stay the same, others change. We all have the same goals with money. We want to be comfortable, and I often reference a quote by Aristotle, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says wealth is evidently not the goal that we are seeking, for it's only meaningful for the use of something else. And so when we look at money, I mean, if we accumulate money and it just sits there on a statement, it brings no value to us. It's ultimately what can that get us in life? That comfort of acquiring things that we enjoy or getting rid of things that bother us. So, with that said, we're all after the same thing, but the way that we digest the conversation is very different. Baby boomers, I think, they grew up the children of, the great generation, of World War II and the Depression. So I think they had a very good value of the dollar that was very close to them. Many of their parents witnessed the Great Depression and they became kind of like this generation that brought about the entitlement system we live on today, whether that be defined benefit pensions, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all the bedrocks of our economy were kind of brought about by baby boomers, and they're the direct beneficiaries of these, at least in the near term. So I think that they have a way of valuing money, understanding that their job is to work, and then kind of the system should then take care of them in a sense after they've done their part, through our entitlement programs. And then they want to digest information, the old school way. They like to talk to people, they like to read, they like to research. Then we fast forward to my generation, millennials, totally different. Okay. We're pretty distanced from the Great Depression era. Maybe we got some stories from a grandparent or something to clue us in. But the way that we digest information is, we came about in the age of the internet, so we were very comfortable saying, all right, I'll click on my phone and I can open up an app and transfer money electronically, just using my thumbprint. And that's something that maybe our parents were very apprehensive about. And so that's just kind of a microcosm of how we intake information through podcasts, blogs, TikTok. Maybe that's the next generation. But we get this information and then we're comfortable acting on it in a much faster manner, in a way that we don't need to shake someone's hand. We're comfortable just kind of seeing it in social media and then digesting it and maybe even taking action on that info. So the decision-making process is completely different versus prior generations.
Very well said, Mr. Bryan. So, can you describe the research process behind what should I do with my money?
So that's a good one. Ultimately, one of the things I always tell people about is it's not so much the answers that matter as the questions. And so, what I was able to do, again, having these conversations all day, every day with clients, is sometimes I start to get asked the same questions more and more often. And so, that obviously provides fodder for a book when it's kind of like, all right, I'm being asked about entitlements. I'm being asked about college. I'm being asked about technology. I'm being asked about the green movement and then all the political influence of all these hot button issues. And so all these kind of big burning questions became the outline for my book. And so you'll see the chapters in there. I start with population, which ultimately dictates everything. We're a planet, existing of 8 billion people that are trying to make economical decisions. And then we filter through all these issues that I was alluding to. So I took those questions, I kind of found out where did that even, bring about more questions, and then whittled that down, with my editor to I believe it was 9 chapters that we condensed that to, or 9 economic domains. And then from there it began very deep research. Some of it, existing knowledge that I had of being a financial advisor, and then the rest of it, and also a student of finance and economics, but then digging deeper, when I would say, okay, why did this tax law come about and what were the consequences? I'd research that, what was going on, what brought about World War II, what brought about World War One, what were the leaders of the nations involved debating, what were they at war over, and then what were the consequences. So all those sort of things just brought about more and more research until there was just all this stuff that was like, okay, this is all meaningful, but now how do we piece it together again to tell a story and then a lesson that someone can carry with them after they read it?
Very well said, Mr. Bryan. So, what challenges did you face while writing? What should I do with my money?
So I think some of the biggest challenges were that I had ideas. I said, you know what, these need to be said. Sometimes they were controversial. It just by mere mention. I mean, as you get into these touchy subjects, things that get politicized constantly, it was like, all right, we need to talk about it, but I'll do it in such an economic way that it's empirical and it's not going to be biased. It's just going to say, hey, here are the facts. Some you're going to like, some you're not going to like, but this is simply what they are and how they got there. So, as I was kind of going through all of that, some of the things I think got difficult is picking and choosing almost how to include everything without including everything. And so I had to get very kind of thorough with what made the cut. And that's the hard thing. I mean, every author knows it when you're writing, and you just create this thing that you think, oh, I'm finally there. I finished this page. I finished this chapter. Now I finished this book. And then you have to go back and say, okay, it's like this big, beautiful block of marble, but now we really got to carve it up. Sometimes it's almost like sad, like you're letting pieces go. So I think that was probably the hardest part, working with my editor, was saying, okay, I have something here I feel like is great, but now it's like we have to make it great for everyone just by virtue of making it readable.
How do you feel your personal experiences have shaped your writing?
So I think we're all just kind of like a reflection of our experiences. Um, I sometimes say, I actually just put in an article this morning that I finished, that we are all that we used to be. And so I feel like that is just so true for everyone. So when you read my book, whether it's Millennial Millionaire that I was writing when I was 24, 25 years old, if you read Anorak, again, during the coronavirus pandemic, at home with my wife and 3 teenage kids, and then as I'm writing, what should I do with my money? You're going to see Bryan Kuderna, in each of these. And you're also going to see kind of that phase of life that I'm in. So I think that my own experiences, they're all out there in the book. I try to remove myself from the equation particularly when I'm writing nonfiction, so that everyone can appreciate it, no matter what side of the aisle that they're on. But my passion for economic literacy and for building wealth in the best way possible, those things are crystal clear throughout my writing.
Yes, indeed. And according to KSG, great book. So, what are the elements that you put in your book that make this book one of a kind?
So I think, one of the things that makes it one of a kind is the way that I'm speaking about money. People just see me as the financial advisor. They say, "Okay, tell me what to do with my money. What's a good tip right here and now for my money?" The book, it gets to that point, it answers that question, but it does it in such a way that a lot of people are surprised when they say, "Okay, I just picked up a book off the shelves called What Should I Do with My Money by a well-known certified financial planner." And then they're reading about religion. They're reading about philosophy and theology. They're reading about the history of wars. They're reading about climate change. And so they get into these subjects sometimes that it's kind of cool when the people almost mistakenly buy it for pure financial advice. And then they start to kind of get this broader knowledge of all the different things that affect that financial advice. I think that's truly what's unique, is that it blends economics, personal finance, and just reality all into one. And then through each chapter, I have these really cool economic insights. So they're like these little graphics that are thrown in there where it's like, okay, let's pause for a second. And then let's just read a quick story of kind of whether what's going on right now or what was going on in history that exemplifies the point of the chapter. So I know a lot of people really like those economic insights.
Well said, Mr. Bryan. But before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Food 101, our third season with Chef Alessandro, one of the best executive chef in one of the best five-star restaurant in downtown Toronto. So please do listen to our latest episode. We talk about spice. Spice, people, one of the ingredients that you need how to create a delicious food plus one more. Our books are out, not only one, but 12 volumes, people. Food 101, Volume 1 Basics until 12 is only the books that you need how to create a delicious food. So please do grab a copy, available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. So, Mr. Bryan, what should I do with my money? What is the best highlight?
One of the best highlights, I think something that got a lot of traction is this acronym that I use, which I actually learned from reading about the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, and it's called MICE. And what MICE stands for is money, ideology, compromise, and ego. And so these are four motives or four things that are innate to all humans, that in every decision we think about them. We think about money, we think about our ideology, our principles, we think about compromise, the give and take of what we're going to gain or what we're going to lose. And then our ego, kind of going back to, we are all that we used to be. What's our ego? What's important to us? And what do we define ourselves as? So that acronym MICE is essentially like the lens that I evaluate all these different economic domains through. So I think that really opened a lot of people's eyes and changed the way that a lot of people think, just by understanding how to use MICE.
Very well said, Mr. Bryan. So, I'm gonna ask you this outside of the topic. As a certified financial planner, what is your piece about climate change?
Yep. So in regards to climate change, I think it's one of these things that it's impacting everyone. We see that on the news every day. We're all aware of it. And then there's essentially two ways that kind of the world can go about it. There's essentially the capitalist model of that the world's always going to self-correct. Okay. People are they're going to hit their own tipping points where they say, all right, this has gotten bad enough. I'm going to recycle more. Or, you know what, I'm finally going to take the plunge in financial plans so that I can get rid of my current car and buy an EV, things like that. And then there's also, from, we could say, maybe more of the socialist standpoint or government intervention standpoint of, trying to kind of guide that path through subsidies and regulation, and things like that. That, again, these all have financial consequence to them. And so that's what people need to learn, is what's in their best, own interests. And then also, what are the governments doing to either hurt or help the cause? And then we all know that the world as a whole wants to get more green. Now, we don't always do that because it comes at a cost. We might be able to buy a car for 10 grand that would be 20 grand to be electric. Just as a country in Africa may not be concerned about, litter when they're just trying to get clean water or something like that. So it's a balancing act. But if we agree that the world is trying to get more green and salvage itself, then we always want to be investing in the technologies and the companies and the processes that are going to get us cleaner and cleaner. And that's where we can be a participant in the green movement, is not only by trying to practice good, environmental hygiene, but also look in the world, where are the opportunities to kind of ride that wave, even with our money.
Do you think that we are too late to combat climate change?
No, absolutely not. I think we're behind the eight ball, but we're humans. So I think usually when we make our progress, it's when we're behind the eight ball, because that's when we say, okay, we got to get serious. There's problems here. I would say that we're probably at that point where we know, we've got 8 billion people on the planet. The planet's not getting any bigger. And we all have, needs that need to be met, and they all require energy. So I think, humans have an incredible resiliency in which we're able to adapt and do what's necessary when it becomes necessary. And so I think we're right about there, and you're seeing it. I mean, you think of a company like Tesla 20 years ago. I mean, that was like a fantasy. Now it's, one of the biggest companies in the world. So you just see how quickly, when people need to innovate, the things, kind of the magic that can happen through collaboration. So it's concerning, but I like to remain the optimist and think that we'll always find our way to not just get around it, but improve it.
Sir Brian, what should I do with my money? Can you please invite our listeners to support this book?
Yes, of course. So everyone, please go check out, again, it's called What Should I Do With My Money? Economic Insights to Build Wealth Amid Chaos. It's available in paperback, audiobook, or Kindle, wherever books are sold. So go check it out, grab a copy, tell a friend, and I promise that you will learn something new you didn't know before. And I hope that it kind of encourages you and inspires you and helps you achieve wealth in that original meaning of a state of well-being.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Bryan Kuderna, because if you support him, more books to come. Mr. Bryan, thank you for your time.
All right. Thanks a lot, Dan. This was a lot of fun.
Bodycount people, see you soon.